Hey, everybody, this is Brett Ingram, and this is the optYOUmize podcast, the show that helps entrepreneurs build their dream business and dream life. Today, we're talking with Katie Krimitsos, founder and CEO of the Women's Meditation Network, a family of 20 meditation podcasts dedicated to helping women and kids find peace, presence, and purpose through guided meditations. Her meditations have been listened to over 170 million times by women all over the world. I'm super excited about this because so many entrepreneurs and people in general nowadays, I think, just live with so much pressure and stress. So finding ways to get recentered, relax, and enjoy life a little bit is more important now than ever. So with that, welcome, Katie, and thanks a lot for joining us.
Thanks so much, Brett. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm super excited to talk to you. As I was telling you before we got started, I'm recovering from a case of the flu. So
Oh my
if I get a
gosh.
little cough sprinkled in here and there, we'll just have to work through it. So
Yep.
I have a lot of stuff I want to talk to you about, but let's start with your personal story. Can you give us a sense of what your background is and how you started your career?
Yeah. I've heard you say on your podcast before that, you got to really question whether entrepreneurship is in your DNA or not. I don't believe it was in mine. I was not raised in an entrepreneurial household. I was raised in a very lower class, blue collar household. I don't think I even knew the word entrepreneur until I was about 22. Um, I was raised in Arizona, came out to Florida, Tampa, Florida, to get my master's degree when I was 22, and finished the master's degree. Kind of jumped into whatever job I could find at the time that would give me a salary, give me any sort of regular income, so I can move from being a poor college student, and somehow found a career in the healthcare space. So towards, oh my gosh, I was 30 years old. I, like, spent my 20s kind of trying to figure it out, and I always thought that the dream job, the next dream job would just have all the answers, and it would make me feel fulfilled, and it would make me feel purposeful, and it would like put together all of my skills and make me feel good about making money and make me feel good about the work I was doing in the world. And I thankfully pretty quickly realized, like, oh man, I don't think that I don't think that that's the road. I've always been incredibly independent. Really didn't like people telling me what I could and could not do. So when I discovered this idea of entrepreneurship, it took many years, but I at some point in my late 20s, I sort of put together, like, oh, I could do a thing called, make my own money doing something I really feel good about and I love. And I'm a writer. I've always really wanted to be a writer. I've always expressed myself via writing. And so I wrote a book when I was 29 years old about how to find your true love. And I was on my own path of doing it, right? Like it's not like I had figured it out. I was just like, okay, I got to do things differently. So I wrote a book about it. And towards the end of the book, I realized, like, I need to figure out how to make money doing this. Like, I don't need to be around other writers. I need to be around other business people so I could replace my income. And that's when I found our local entrepreneurial group. Ended up meeting my now husband that way. Um, and I sort of dove into entrepreneurship that way. And I was like, okay, I could figure this out. My husband at the time had just started a local entrepreneurial organization. And so um, I was sort of at the tail end of my job saying, do I really want to do this? Like, I know it's regular money, but, like, do I really want to do this? And I'm somebody who has very low tolerance for unhappiness. So I was like, you know what? I'm done. I'm going to go all in on trying to, how hard could it be to make $5,000 a month, selling a book? How hard could that be? I figured out in about a month. I was doing a bunch of content marketing back then, like had a YouTube channel, like all driving towards the book, all that stuff. But I figured out quite quickly that that was what I knew back then, it was going to be a long haul of a game. And so I was like, okay, well, Chris has this business model going. I'll just dive in full throttle with his business. And so I became like the co-owner and the COO of that company. And because we were supporting entrepreneurs and we were, organizing education for entrepreneurs, it was a membership group. I fell in love with entrepreneurship, and I started cutting my teeth on, like, what is this all about? Meanwhile, it was very much like the peanut butter and jelly years for us. That's how we describe it. Like, it was like, what do we need to do to keep the doors open? Like, how
Yeah.
are we growing? He's just like a genius entrepreneur who's been, you know, having sort of entrepreneurial expressions ever since he was a little kid. And so this was just like his next venture. He was used to the ride. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have a paycheck every 2 weeks. What's going on? So in that, we did that for many years. And then at some point in 2012, I think it was 2013, we had heard about podcasting. And we were, curating content and speakers and education for entrepreneurs. And so we knew somebody who was doing a podcast, and they had a business made out of their podcast. And both of us were just like, oh my gosh, like we just saw how fantastic and how what a powerful medium this could be, right? And so by then I was in love with entrepreneurship, and I was like, I want to start a podcast. And I started a podcast in February of 2014 called Biz Women Rock, supporting women entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
not knowing what the hell I was going to do with it. I just knew that I could talk forever about entrepreneurship. I interviewed women entrepreneurs, and back then it was one of three podcasts that existed that did that was hosted by a woman entrepreneur, talked to female founders. Um, so I was in rare territory. And so I quickly gained a really sticky, loyal, beautiful niche audience of women entrepreneurs. And over time, I just built that business. Like I became a business strategist. I did masterminds. I had courses. Had membership. I had live retreats. Like you name it, that was the business model that I had. And so that was like my first real, like, I am actually making money doing something I love. And this whole thing can actually work, right? And then in 2018, I got pregnant with my second daughter. And just in a heartbeat of a moment, I just had heard the whisper of like, I'm done with that business. And the very short story, because that could be a very long story, but the very short story is that's when the Women's Meditation Network idea was planted in the sort of like unknowing of what am I going to do if this isn't it. And so that was 6.5 years ago. And, we started with one meditation podcast, Meditation for Women, and now we have 20. So that is a very glossy version of sort of the career path, but there are many, many dark moments, many, many bumps in the road, many, many mistakes. But that's kind of where it's been.
It's an amazing journey. And, it's great that you're intuitive enough to listen to yourself the whole time. I mean, so many people, I think, have an instinct, but they fight against it because it doesn't make sense, or there's something that they've been told where that won't work, or, something that causes them to doubt themselves in terms of being able to do it. And by focusing on something that you know that you're passionate about, the one thing about it is you don't ever lack enthusiasm. It's
No.
difficult to gear up for something that you don't really like to do, especially if it isn't going well. But if it's something you're passionate about, then you can do it no matter what, right? And so
Yeah.
it's funny your reaction to discovering podcasting, because for me, also being an entrepreneur for 17 years and mostly in the digital space, I had a brick and mortar when I first got out of college years and years ago. But um, one of the things for me that I always keyed on was the fact that, look, it doesn't matter how great your product or service is or anything else. You got to have an audience that you're going to be able to share this with, that's going to benefit them for someone to be able to buy it.
Right.
And there's limited ways that you can get people to pay attention to what you're offering or whatever. I mean, you can buy ads, but almost all the methods that you're going to use, you're trading either money for, attention, or you're trading tons of time to be able to do it. And so to be able to do something where you could build an audience that's naturally attracted to what you're doing because it's built into what you're doing, I think also just makes so much sense. And, it just allows people to align and be where they want to be in the right areas and focuses. So I think that that's super cool. So meditation, how did you first become interested and involved in meditation in all this?
Yeah. I was 19 years old, 4 years into my undergrad at Arizona State, and I was taking a yoga class. And my very first class, the teacher, we did our yoga, and then at the very end, we're, in Shavasana position at the very end, just laying down on the mat, and she took us through a guided meditation for 5 minutes. And I remember, I remember the feeling I had after that meditation was of lightness, and my mind was blank, I think, for the first time in my life. And I was like, what was that? Whatever that was, I want to keep doing that. And so I just started learning more, like, I mean, just a little, like, I would just be like, what is meditation? What is this thing? Why do we do it? And, fast forward a week or two, I remember being in my dorm room alone, lighting all the candles, doing what I thought meditation looked like. And it's sort of what we all think it looks like, right? Like I was sitting in a perfect, beautiful, cross-legged position. My back was straight. It's nighttime. The candles are on. I've got some music going in the background. And I remember sitting there, and it took all of 20 seconds for me to just be like, I hate meditation. This is so hard, because my brain was just everywhere. My back was hurting. I was so uncomfortable. That said, I just started, like I think anytime that some sort of fire is lit within us about any interest, or there's any curiosity, no matter what, no matter how much there is, but there's some level of curiosity. We just go forward and we seek it out, right? We seek out more, like what is this? So I just sought it out. And at some point I discovered, guided meditation CDs in the library. And I was like, oh, guided. Okay, this isn't as hard. This is kind of cool. And I could just feel the benefits really quickly. I could feel a calmer body. I could feel a clearer mind. It was never perfect. I mean, I usually could last just a couple of minutes, even with a guided meditation, as far as like my mind feeling like it was slowing down. But I could feel the benefits enough to be like, I want more. So over the years, I discovered, once I moved out to Florida, like I would go to our local Buddhist center and just be like, oh, they have, they're having a series on XYZ. Let me go. And I would just practice whatever meditation they were doing. Eventually, I sort of met a woman who would host, friendly guided meditations at her house once a week. And I probably did that for a year or two. Like sometimes it was just the two of us. Sometimes there were 10 of us. And I just loved it. Like I would have these beautiful visions during the meditations. Sometimes it was equally frustrating because I couldn't really get myself to focus. Eventually I found a meditation podcast, and I was like, oh, I could just do this on my phone. This is amazing. So throughout the years, as I've become friendlier and friendlier with meditation and danced with this tool, I've sort of experimented with how I use it. So what it has come to be for me, and the beating heart of why I love meditation and why I want to share it with the world, is because I see it as one of the most powerful tools for self-awareness. Because if I can help calm your mind and quiet yourself enough so you could hear that inner voice, that intuition, then perhaps you might actually start taking action on what she says and what he says. And I am so resolute that once you do, you will see how powerful our intuition is, and you will help yourself. You'll start making decisions not based on the noise of the world, but you will start making decisions based on your own intuition, even if it's a little baby step, and you will start piecemealing your life together in a way that is 100% yours. And if each of us really truly live that way, my God, what a different world we would be in. Instead of building lives that are scripted for us, or scripted from a past version of us. So for me, meditation has become that, is a very powerful tool in my life. Sometimes it's sitting down for 5 minutes after my kids left for school this morning, in the 5 minutes I had before I needed to like get the day going. And sometimes it's a formal sit down meditation that I'm listening to. So for me, it's just always been a very imperfect but very personal practice that I can sort of use and maneuver and make it work for me, with the ultimate goal of getting to know me and having that tool to design my life from the inside out.
That's really cool and really powerful. I mean, I know it's kind of funny because it isn't even really meditation itself, but I know for me, my mind is always going a million miles an hour. And even as a little boy, I remember in the summertime, if the sun was still up, but it was time for bed, my parents would tell me go to bed. And I'm laying in bed and my mind is just going a million miles an hour. And I would say, I can't sleep. I can't sleep. Just lay there. You don't have to sleep. And so I eventually realized like when you lay there enough, your mind will eventually go quiet because you run yourself in circles so much. And I mean, I wasn't thinking of it in the context of meditation or anything like that. I was just a little boy, but I remember like the challenge it was to find that stillness because you always have so much stimulus, you have so many things going on, you have so many thoughts. And to your point, nowadays especially, we're inundated with visions of what our lives should be, how we should construct them, what we should stand for, what we should strive to achieve. When in reality, what really matters is that you focus on what's right for you because no amount of money, no amount of success, no amount of anything is ever going to make you happy if it isn't aligned with who you are and what matters to you. And that's a lesson I think it's not always easy for people to learn. I know, look, my own two boys, one of them is about to graduate from college, another one has a year left in high school. And, one of the things that they would say a lot as well, I want to do something where, make a lot of money. Well, that's great, but find something that you're passionate about and then find a way to make a lot of money doing that. Don't chase the money because you saw that there's a paycheck here, because that's just going to be a recipe of discontent and, frustration. And so, thankfully even though they pretend not to, I think they do actually listen to us a little bit. So, they do seem to be following what makes them happy, which is good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's fascinating. So from a benefit standpoint, obviously you've got the calmness and things like that. And you think from the perspective of really getting to know yourself and what's really important to you, those are things that you think, are there other benefits as well that we get from meditation?
Oh, yeah. I think the most popular outward facing benefits obviously can help you sleep. It's calming your nervous system. It's lowering like it's kind of the spiked, bad hormones, let's say, and like raising up all those nice, happy hormones. It's lowering blood pressure. Um, there's so many physical benefits from it that are sort of obvious once you think about like what does it feel like when I'm actually calm and centered versus what does it feel like when I'm running the rat race. um, so those are obvious. And I think on the deeper psychological level, the deeper spiritual level, the benefits are so much bigger, um, in that we have morning meditation for women podcast. Those meditations, and all the meditations that we create that are really for daytime experiences, for example, are very, very much there to help you start your day with intention. So you're not just sort of like floating down the river of life, like you're creating your own path. So if you start your day with a moment of mindfulness, you're able to sort of take a pause between stimulus and response for yourself for the start of the day. And you're able to sort of say, okay, instead of the day coming at me and me just responding, how can I create my day today? What kind of parent do I want to be today? What do I want my schedule to be today? What kind of work do I want to do in this world in a meaningful way? And just like you said, with our businesses, how can we, equally, I got that message too when I was a kid, which was like, don't follow the money, follow what you love, money will happen. And how do you make sure you're following what you love in a way that is actually meaningful to you and isn't someone else's version of that? And this is such a great example because you and I have been, you are, and I was in the same position of being able to share wisdom for this entrepreneurial journey, for example, right? And so when you're sharing wisdom about this entrepreneurial journey, you have to make sure you're doing it in a way that is sort of an experience share and like, hey, let me tell you what has worked with person A, B, and C. And then at the end of the day, you need to go find your own path and put that, cobblestone, that life together. Because in the entrepreneurial space, in life in general, parenting, physical health, all these things, there's so much information And there's so many scripts and blueprints and follow this 10-step program. And at the end of the day, we're the ones in charge of deciding what works and what does not. So no matter how much advice you get here on this particular episode, and I'm going to say, hey, this is what worked for me, it may not work for you and it may not jive with your particular life or your values right now. So, ultimately, yes, there's this giant layer of all these physical and mental benefits of meditation. The pool of, unlimited value underneath is this deep spiritual connection to self, so that you know who you are at any given moment of your life and you can show up to the world as authentically as you possibly can.
That's awesome. I mean, really well said. And it definitely sells the idea of wanting to get more engaged in meditation if we haven't done it yet. So I'm curious from the other side of things, in your experience, based on talking to people and everything else about it, is there one main common misconception about meditation or something that people get wrong and don't understand?
Yes. The first is that my mind should be blank the entire time. Like if I'm really doing meditation right, my mind should be completely blank and I should feel calm. And that's not really true. It's a good goal to have, but the truth is that it's your brain's job to make thoughts. So, really what we're doing during a meditation practice is not necessarily completely silencing and throwing away all those thoughts. What we're doing is we're observing them. And so one of the biggest and I think most popular tools that I love giving to meditators is, your job is just to observe those thoughts. So come into yourself. We use, the breath and the physical body, physical sensations in order to sort of like draw our attention away from those thoughts, which is where they kind of normally live, and come into sensation, come into presence this way. And then what ends up happening is like a couple seconds might pass and, oh, I got to put the laundry. I got to switch the laundry. And, oh, what am I going to do this? Oh, yeah, I'm not really, I need to get some water in between calls, like, like all the things, right? What time am I picking up kids? And that's okay. And then you'll notice. And then two things happen. Number one, you could either get really mad because dang it, my meditation practice is supposed to be thoughtless. There's not supposed to be thoughts here. I suck. I fail at this. I hear this a lot. I'm horrible at meditation. No, you're not. Like these, and you're judging, your success at meditation because of these thoughts. And the truth is the thoughts are going to happen. So our job just becomes to observe the thoughts and to be able to, one visual that I love using is like observe them as if they are clouds in the sky and you're just watching them pass by and you're sort of actively giving yourself the power to be able to allow them to pass by instead of sitting on you and being you and those thoughts becoming you, right? Same thing with emotions. So we might sit down on any given day and be feeling anger, frustration, anxiety, fear, excitement, like lots of energy. And so our job is just to recognize these emotions and be like, that's really interesting that I'm feeling, a lot of anger towards my husband in this particular moment. That's really interesting. So instead of the anger being us, I am angry, it becomes, I'm feeling this emotion called anger. Isn't that interesting? Let me just allow that to move past. So what it does in this practice is we give ourselves permission to be human. We give ourselves permission to have the thoughts. We give ourselves permission to have the emotions, and we don't allow it to be us, right? So there's a separation there. And in that, the true power here is that now we have choice. Now we are able to see that we as these beautiful souls are not just our thoughts. We are not just our emotions, but we're something so much greater and so much more powerful and so much more beautiful than just these things. So all of a sudden, these things don't have total control over us. This is especially important. I know I'm kind of diving off the deep end here, but I so believe in it. It's especially important. It's especially important, for example, in our relationship with our kids, because I love using this example because it's so real for me, especially. My worst parenting moments are at nighttime. I'm exhausted. My kids seem to have an extra bounce of energy right when I'm exhausted. They don't want to go to bed. Everyone wants to stay up, right? And when things don't go well, it looks like my normal tactics of getting them to bed are not working, and my volcano is about to erupt. That's the language that we use in my house. So if I'm able to do something like, hey, I'm just going to stop and take, like, before the volcano erupts, before I yell at my kids, which, I'm absolutely guilty of. Um, but I don't want to do that. If I can create a space between stimulus and response, if I can create that space and just take a couple deep breaths and notice the anger I'm feeling, notice why I'm feeling that anger, the gazillion thoughts that are going on in my head. The only reason I'm feeling that anger is because I have other things I want to do and I don't want to be there, right? I want it to be done because I have all these other things to do. I either want to go straight to bed, or I have work to do, or I have to clean up the kitchen, whatever. So the resistance that's happening there is because I'm not present. So what it does is that breath brings me into presence. The space between the thoughts and all the emotions I'm having allows me to see that I actually have a choice in how I want to show up. So in that moment, I can choose, you know what? Either mommy's going to go take a time out for a couple of minutes to go do a couple deep breaths, or just within 3 deep breaths right there, I can choose to come into presence and be with my kids, and to know that no matter how long bedtime takes, everything's going to be okay. So I can be there present with them. And sometimes that's when the most beautiful connective moments happen. Like, that happens to be the time that my 9-year-old wants to talk about her day. And I'm like, okay, I'm there. Like, if I weren't present for that, I would have hurried her through and I wouldn't know these stories about her. I wouldn't have these opportunities to talk about these really big, important, valuable, values and ways of seeing the world and beliefs, right? I wouldn't have had this opportunity to like be present and snuggle with my 6-year old because I would have been in such a rush to just get her to sleep. So, um, equally, we can use these tactics in any area of our lives, in those areas of our lives in our businesses that are feeling fast and furious, and we don't feel like we have control, right? These are the moments that you can step into, knowing that all of the feelings and oh my gosh, let's talk about the fear about money when it comes to business, right? The fear of, like, the highs and the lows, the fears of not being liked, of being canceled if you're a business where your face is out there, like, just all of those fears that start bubbling up. You can create this space between the emotions and the feelings and the thoughts you're having about it, and kind of come back into you and realize, how am I going to show up here? I have a choice. What does that look like? And oftentimes in that space, that's when we hear that whisper. That's when we hear the intuition going, do this, talk to this person. That typically for me is when the answers come of what the next best move is. So, you know, it is really, meditation becomes, and not even, it doesn't need to look like anything. It just needs to look like taking a pause in some way. To me, that's what meditation really is.
And I really like that. And, the other part of it that I think you touched on throughout it is the fact that it's a skill, right? So, like anything else that we're doing, if you learn to ride a bike, nobody got on the bike the first time, rode down the street, started doing wheelies. You go 2 feet, you fall down, you skin your knee. You don't stop riding a bike. You get up,
Right.
you try it over again. So maybe in the beginning, you can't get your mind to quiet. You can't get the things to work. You're still going 100 miles an hour. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the more, clever you become at figuring out how to make it work in a way that makes sense for you. And that will actually get you the results that you're looking for. So I
Exactly. They
do
call it a
think,
practice for a reason. They call it a meditation practice for a reason.
yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I was talking to a martial arts guy, several months back, and he had said, just the breath work alone, he said you could study for your lifetime and not master all of it. He said, he's been doing it for 40, 50 years, and he said there's elements of it that he doesn't still feel like he has a total understanding of or whatever, but he finds it totally transformative because of the ability to do different things with it. So
Yeah.
I just find all of that super, super fascinating. And, it's funny because it flies in the face so often of what we're taught all the time, that we need to be doing more, faster, like harder. Everything needs to be bigger and more intense. And in reality, I live in the Northeast in the US, and where I am, it tends to be a very competitive and super intense environment anyway. So the last thing I think we need to do is ratchet up the intensity. I think people
Yes.
need to learn how to step back a little bit and enjoy things a little bit and not always worry about, this achievement or that accomplishment or, who bought this or who's got that or, and it will drive you nuts, if you let it. And so
Yeah.
finding something that gives you that balance, that gives you that centeredness, I think is super important. So if someone is brand new to meditation, they want to get involved, they want to get started, what would you recommend?
I would recommend two things. First, I would recommend starting to sprinkle mini meditations into your day. These are really small, beautiful moments of mindfulness. Most often, the biggest tool that I love using is your breath. So these are moments that you can do after you've dropped off the kids, you're sitting in your car, you're about to run in and start your day. Before you do that, come into your breath and take 5 deep conscious breaths, meaning you're counting one breath in, one breath out. You'll sometimes be amazed, as I am still, at how quickly you lose your count, and that's okay. Start over. But you will immediately feel the physical response from that. You'll immediately feel the physical benefits of just feeling calmer. Your mind will immediately feel clearer so that you can now go into your day. If you're in the shower, instead of thinking all of the things of the task list you need to do today, come into presence. Allow your breath to sort of bring you into the moment. Feel the warm, shower and water on your body. Just be there in the moment. So these mini meditations are so powerful because they sort of like recalibrate us in a heartbeat. So at any given moment throughout your day, no matter what you're feeling, you can sort of come back into you really powerfully. And then you get to create that moment from there. The second thing that I love recommending are guided meditations. I mentioned this before. Guided meditations to me are sort of like hiring a trainer to work out or doing like a workout class. You don't have to do the thinking. So guided meditation, me and my guides are doing all the heavy lifting. We are verbally talking you through what to do. So, focus on your breath, focus on this part of your body. Let's see if you can imagine XYZ, right? So guided meditations are so powerful because all you have to do is press play on them. That's it. Close your eyes, press play, let me do the heavy lifting, and then boom, at the end, you're going to feel the experience. You're going to feel the benefits of that. So those are two easy things that any one of us can sprinkle in throughout our day.
Very cool. So you have a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, you're raising a family, you've got your business and life in general, just how busy everything gets. But I'm curious because I know a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with balancing running a family, running a business, and still trying to have a life. How are you able to get it all done?
Ah, I love this question. Um, the number one thing that I do is I tune into myself very frequently, meaning I am constantly very aware of what my values are and what kind of life I want to lead. So when I first became a mom, I was already an entrepreneur. So I was already in the entrepreneur game. I was used to being able to have 100-hour or 150-hour weeks, right? I was used to being able to wake up early, stay up late, like it didn't matter. I could grind. And I thought that that's what gave you success in entrepreneurship back then. And then I had a kid and I was like, whoa, I don't want, not only can I not work like that without some serious decisions and help, but I don't want to. I really don't want to. I really want to be a part of raising my kid. I want to be a super hands-on, very proactive parent. How do I do this? So I remember my daughter was, I think, 6, 9 months, and I went away on a little solo retreat. I had like 48 hours to myself. And I still do those very actively, probably 3 or 4 times a year. And I remember at the time what I ended up calling my mompreneur mission statement. Here, what is important for me as I sort of step into this new season of my life? What are my values? What is very important to me? What do I want to make sure that I'm doing in this world and with my life so that I don't fall prey to a scripted life? And, of course, the first things that came up were like, I want to be a very active, present mother. I want to do meaningful work in the world that makes great money and helps other people. I want to have a thriving relationship with my husband. I want to be super healthy and fit, and I want to feel good in my body. I want to have really great close friendships, and I want to nurture and have time to nurture those friendships. So I think all of us would probably have very similar values if we wrote them down. And then what I did is I said, okay, if these are my values, how are they showing up on my calendar? And I got really practical. I'm an operator, so I was just like, boom, 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 boom. How are we doing this? How are we operationalizing this vision statement? And so I got really clear, and I was like, okay, knowing those values helped me actually design my weeks. I see my life in like week-long chunks. So, how am I designing my life? What do my Mondays look like? What do my Tuesdays look like? What do my weekends look like? And once I got sort of clear on like, okay, how am I now batching work? How am I, optimizing the time that I'm working so that work time isn't bleeding into family time? It can. I mean, that we're entrepreneurs, it can, but I don't like it to. I don't like being on the phone or checking email when my kids are around. Um, I really have those two worlds, not separate, but like I'm present completely for each of them, right? So, so it was that. How am I making time for my workouts? If that's important to me, how am I making time for those things? If how am I making time? How am I making time for me and my husband? So it just shows up like when you start asking yourself, how is it showing up on my calendar? All your values live very practically on your calendar. When are you doing date night? When are you having time with your kids? When are you shutting down the computer? When you do have the computer open or where it is work time, what are you doing and how are you maximizing your tasks, your efforts, your energy? This is a whole different conversations, but layered on top of this schedule is energy management, which is completely different, but complementary to time management. So when I'm in business mode, for example, even though on my calendar it says, okay, Monday from this time to this time is work time. And even though I'm like, okay, well, most important thing is I got to write. Writing is the most important thing. I'm writing meditations. I'm writing, articles. I'm writing all of these things, but I don't feel like writing on Monday. I'm in a get shit done kind of a mode on Monday. I want to check things off of a list. So energy management is recognizing that energy and placing the tasks in line with the time with that is optimal to do those things. You've ever read the book, The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks? Um, he talks about Einstein time. It's a great book, by the way. So he talks about Einstein time. And there are anyone who's ever sat down to try and write an article, there are times where you could sit down and it takes you 3 hours and you're barely squeezing it out. And then there are times that you could sit down and hash out that article in 15 minutes, right? That's time optimization. That's energy management. So that's knowing when am I in the best energy to write? When am I in the best energy to do administrative things? When am I in the best energy to be present with my kids? Like let me marry those things with the actual calendar. So that's a very boring and practical answer to that is that I start with my values and I recalibrate this on probably a weekly, monthly basis. Sometimes I do a complete overhaul on it, but I'm very aware of what's important to me at any given moment, and I don't want to waste my time with the other stuff.
And look, I think that that's super important. And, there's a lot of key things in there. Number one, if you don't have the intention, and so you don't schedule the things that are important, what happens is it's the old to-do list rollover effect, where you got all these things that you mean to do, but because you didn't really put them in a realistic place where you could get them done, they just keep rolling to the next day, rolling to the next day. And then eventually a day becomes a week becomes a month. And then that goal that you had or that thing that was important to you is now a month down the road and you haven't even looked at it. So
Right.
I fully agree with you there. And from the energy standpoint, it's funny because I've definitely experienced times where you just get into sort of that flow state with whatever it is that you're working on. And, it might be late at night thinking to myself, geez, I probably should go to bed, but I'm sort of flying right now. The kids are asleep. My wife is asleep. I think I'm just going to hammer this out for the next 2 hours because
Yeah.
I'm making really good progress. So when I wake up in the morning and try to start it again, I got to keep recalibrating my mind. I'm not in the right headspace for it. So 100% agree with the idea of matching that energy with, when and whenever possible, being able to match that is so valuable because you can get so much done so much faster. And I
Yeah.
think that that is definitely one of the secrets. It's hard to get all the things you want to get done every day, regardless. But at least if you're getting things done in an efficient way, because you're focusing on the energy that's connected with what you need to do, then that makes a lot more sense. Um, all right. So where can people find you, your products, your services, and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can listen to any number of our hundreds of meditations completely free that we put out across all the podcast apps. So on whatever podcast app you're listening to this on, you can just go type in Women's Meditation Network or Meditation for Women. We will come up with both. And go choose from any of our podcasts. Or you could go to womensmeditationnetwork.com and you could see everything we have there.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I have one last question I have to ask because I think it's
Yeah,
important. And I
yeah.
always like to know what everyone's going to say. And that's, what's your number one tip for success as a business owner or an entrepreneur?
Um, Listen to yourself. No matter what anyone else says, even if your past self says that it's, not the way. If you know that it's a way, trust your intuition. There are plenty of people, and I know, Brett, that you could say this too. I know that you've had people along the way who have been like, this is so stupid. There's no way you're going to succeed. You can't do this. Um, and they're not even the naysayers. They're people who love you sometimes who are just like, no, you've already got something good going. Why would you go a complete different direction? Or you should be doing this thing, Katie. Like that would really help you grow, but something inside you is not ready for it. It's not your time to do it yet. Listen to yourself. Your intuition is never wrong, ever.
That's great advice. Perfect. Thanks for that. All right. With that, it's about time to wrap things up. I want to thank you again so much, Katie, for sharing all of your insights with us.
Thank
Visit
you.
womensmeditationnetwork.com for free access to meditations. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. And as always, remember, no matter what you want for your business and your life, don't compromise, optimize.